So this is almost centered, pretty much there. So I'm going to start to make my cylinder by opening this up. So my left hand is still on the side, pushing against, making sure it won't open up that way. And my right hand is over the top, again connected, it's a unit. It's gliding against my thumb. And I'm going to let my finger sit across the top until I feel the center where it's not moving, right? The center isn't going to be moving. The outsides will. The further out, the faster it goes. I'm going to gently start to push in at that point. At this point, I can still make adjustments if I've done something that isn't center. And I'm going to gently push in. As I feel the clay grab at my hand, if I feel any friction, I'm going to stop. I'm going to ease off my pressure, and I'm going to get some water on my finger, and I'm going to keep going. I never want to just let go really quickly, because the clay is going to follow my hands. And I don't want it to get off center because I've just done all that work to get it centered. So I'm going to push down in a V. I don't want it to just be a hole because that'll suction onto my finger. I want a nice wide V. And I'm going to stop when I think I've got a floor of clay. And so the floor should be about the thickness you would want in a piece, plus a little bit because you're going to cut it off. So I'm going to take my pin tool and I'm going to push it down into the floor and put my finger down to touch the clay and see kind of what thickness that is. That looks about right. That's a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch, which is probably what I'm looking for, 1/4 of an inch for the floor and then a little bit extra so I can cut it. And then I'm going to start my wheel again. And as my clay gets thinner, you'll see that my wheel slows down. It's still really thick right now, so it can still go kind of similar to speed of centering, but it'll start to slow down as I do other things. So now my left hand is sort of moving from being to the side to being sort of facing my body with the heel of my hand. And I'm going to use that hand to pull against and draw my finger across this. Now, when we do this, you're not going to kind of do what you usually do with your finger, because that goes up and makes a scoop. What you want to do instead is to kind of try to keep your finger level and draw it across to make a flat floor, which takes practice because you just want to scoop up. And sometimes people will overcompensate and drive down, and then you don't have a floor at all. So you got to try to find that happy medium. You got to practice. And what you should end up with is a pretty flat floor that has marks from your nail dragging across it. And then, so before we go any further, we need to compress the floor of our piece by moving our finger back and forth across it. We don't want to cross the midline because that'll kind of pull our finger in the wrong direction. We're always working, except for when we're using both hands, we're working on this quadrant over here. So I'm going to use it in that quadrant and compress the floor. I'm not taking away any clay. I'm compressing the clay into itself. I'm laying down all those clay particles so that it's nice and strong. If we skip this step, you're more than likely going to get cracks in the bottom of your piece. Compression is super, super important. So now I've got this wide open form. I've got this really thick amount of clay here. And I need to make this into a shape that I can start to actually do my pulls on. So this is when my hands sort of change. And now my right hand is on the outside and my left hand is going to be on the inside. And with this, I'm going to make it sort of a jig with my hands. And I'm going to move this hand in tilted inward and have the fingers of the left hand push against it. And so the only place the clay can go is up. And so instead of having this thick ring, I end up with something that looks sort of like a volcano. So now that I have that, I've got consistent walls and it's starting to move upward. Now I can start doing my pulls, which is what most people think about when they think about throwing. So I'm going to start by compressing the lip of the piece. I've got my finger and thumb of the left hand around it with the forefinger of the right hand on top, making a little U, and I'm just gently pushing down to compress that clay. if your piece is a little off center, these sorts of things can help to mitigate any off-centeredness. If you always go and recenter your lip, and you always come and you recenter your piece, just gentle pressure with both hands, it can really control that. So when I do pulls, using my fingers, I'm using small patches of my skin. I don't want to use the flat of my hand. You could use a knuckle, you can use your fingertips. It's really what's comfortable to you, but you don't want large pieces of skin. You want patches that can touch each other and do some compression. So if you notice, my right hand is going to be against the wheel head at first, and my left hand can't be against the wheel head because there's clay down there, which means my left fingers are slightly higher than my right fingers. So what we're going to do is we're going to push out with the inside hand, and we catch a lump of clay, and we move our hands together as a unit, and that pressure moves up the side of the piece. So I'm going to push out and then catch it with the right hand and move up the side of the piece. And as I get to the top, I'm going to ease off so I don't rip the top of the piece. And now I've moved my piece. And if I feel like I've got some off-centeredness, I'm going to always recompress the lip and recenter the top. And then always remember, if you feel any friction, add some water. And I'm going to push out from the inside, grab it from the outside, and move up the side of the piece. And I'm going to ease off when I get to the top. So I'm starting to get a nice cylinder. You can probably see the concentric rings that I'm getting. That means I'm pulling at the right speed for my wheel. If my piece had a spiral in it, that would mean that I was pulling too fast for the speed. And if I was pulling too slow, then I would end up with a thin spot and it would collapse. So we want to try to pull for the speed of your wheel. And as your piece gets thinner, you're going to want to slow your wheel down. You'll also notice that my piece looks fairly straight, but I'm actually pulling slightly inward because the wheel wants to open the clay up. So as long as I pull it inward a little bit, it'll keep it straight, and then if I need to adjust it, I can do so pretty easily. It's easier to bring it out than it is to bring it in. So if I keep it a little bit in, then I don't have to struggle with it so much if I'm trying to make a cylinder. So I'm going to push out, catch it, bring up the side of the piece, and ease off as I come to the top. So I'm getting decently thin here. I could do another pull probably. You also don't have to pull the whole side at once. You could, if you know you're thick at the bottom, which you'll probably will be, because usually you are at the beginning of when you start throwing, then you can just do part of the way up and stop when you start to feel it be thin. So I'm probably going to start thinking about finishing this cylinder up. So what does that mean? I have to think about the shape, I have to think about the lip, and I have to think about the bottom. So we're going to start with the shape. I want it to be a cylinder, which means I need to make it a cylinder. I need to have straight walls. I'm going to slow my speed down a little bit here. And I'm going to put my rib against the bat. I'm also going to put it against the piece. Now I'm not holding this at a 90-degree angle. I'm holding it more at like, maybe not a 45, maybe 30-degree angle, because I don't want the clay to kind of rip it away from me. And I want to have a good hold of that rib, and I want to push out from the inside. Everything with throwing needs to have an equal and opposite force. So if I'm pushing from the outside, I also want to be pushing from the inside so I don't collapse the piece. And I want to try to make that as straight as I can to have it be a cylinder. When I feel pretty good about the shape, You doing this also helps me clean the surface of the piece so I don't have a bunch of liquid slip on it, which makes it easier for me to move later. The next thing I'm going to do is the bottom. So I'm going to use my wooden knife tool, and I'm going to hold it so that I can use the edge and separate the two layers of clay. So I'm going to move in, kind of holding it like you would a pencil, or I would a pencil anyway, and I'm going to get underneath it and kind of make a little lip. Makes a little shadow, takes away some of the extra clay, makes it look a little bit more finished. And then I'm going to scrape that clay away. So now my bottom looks much more finished, and I might need to go back and forth a little and kind of clean that up. And then I need to think about my lip. Now my lip is just a little bit wobbly, so I need to trim it so that it is flat. Also, as you're throwing, you should keep watching the inside of your piece. If you're accumulating water down there, take your sponge and get it out of there so that you're not having water sit, because that can weaken the clay. When I cut the lip, I'm going to use the pin tool as sort of an extension of my finger. I'm not holding it like this. I got it as an extension of my finger. I'm going to use my left hand on the inside of the piece and just gently have my fingers rest against it. It's connected to the pin tool here. So I'm touching the pin tool with both fingers, and I'm going to go below the lowest point, and I'm going to gently push into the side at an angle. And when I feel that come through, I can lift up and pull off the top. So now the uneven part of my lip is cut off, and I have a nice level lip. And I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to soften out that lip, taking away. You can do it by recentering the lip, by recompressing, by using a tool, by using your fingernails, and just softening that out, because anything that is sharp when it is clay will be really sharp when it's covered in glaze. So we want to avoid sharp edges in clay. It's also more prone to chipping if it's sharp, and it makes the glaze run away from it. So in general, we want soft edges. And if you accidentally bump it, you can just gently recenter. And then I've got a cylinder with a flat lip, with a trimmed bottom, and with dry sides that I can then more easily pick it up with. So I'm going to turn off my wheel, and I want to clean off my hands with a sponge, and then you'll probably want to have a towel that you can dry your hands off with, because you want your hands to be dry when we go to take this off of the wheel. So I'm going to grab my pin tool, my what do you call this? Wire tool. And I'm going to turn off my wheel so that I don't accidentally kick the pedal and ruin my work. So I've got my wire tool, and I'm going to choke up on this so it's not loose. And I'm going to put some water behind my piece. And I'm going to drag this wire tool through the water against the bat so it goes underneath the piece. And you can see it's already loose because of that water, because the water makes a layer between the two things of clay. And if I use circular motion to move it off, I can move it off of the piece, put it down on a bat or on a board to be ready for my next piece. So I'm going to put this down on the water, and we're going to cut this in half and see how I did, so I can show you the inside. And once you start getting pieces that you're happy with, I would encourage you to do this so that you can see where you're at, because you might be accumulating thick spots that you're not aware of otherwise. So you can see the piece. I definitely could have done some more pulls on it. It doesn't need to be this thick. Certainly as we start out, It'll be a little thicker, and as you go get more comfortable, you'll get thinner and thinner. And it's hard to know how far you can push the clay without pushing it past its limits. So sometimes it's important to see how thin you can make it before it collapses. So I could have done some more pulls on this, but in general it's very consistent, which is what we're looking for. We're looking for consistent thickness all the way around.